Hey.
Ooh, I feel like it's been quite a while since I've seen you, Greg.
Yeah. I don't think you were at the one before, and then I wasn't at the last one. So, yeah, it's probably been 2 months.
All right. Good evening. Welcome to the City of Ferndale Planning Commission meeting of Wednesday, June 5th. We'll start the meeting at 6:30. Seems really pointless. We'll start with a roll call, please.
Hagfors.
Here.
Newman.
Here.
Azar.
Here.
Chair Foster.
Here.
Showalter.
Here.
Brazen.
Here.
Subakatani.
Here.
And Councilman Polika.
Here.
And we did hear from
Michelle.
Sam Michelli that he could not make it this evening.
Motion to excuse.
Second.
That is a motion by Brazen and a second by Showalter. All those in favor?
Aye.
Next, we'll have approval of the minutes from the meeting of May 1st, 2020. Sorry, approval of the agenda would be first, actually. This evening, we have a public hearing for the consideration of a rezoning and site plan at 918 St. Louis. Any additions or amendments to the agenda?
I move to approve the agenda as presented. Support.
Motion by Polika and support by Hagfors. All those in favor?
Aye.
Next to the minutes of the May 1st Joint Planning Commission meeting with the FIAC.
So through the chair, these were not included in the packet, as I think you all saw. So I have printed them out. However, I know it's a little short notice. So if you want, we can table this to the next meeting, unfortunately. That's what I would recommend, unless you had the chance to all read the minutes since you've been here.
Motion to table the minutes until the next meeting.
Second.
Motion to table by Showalter and second by Brazen. Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
All right, next we have a call to audience. So if anyone in the audience would like to speak on anything other than the matter of the 918 St. Louis, which we will have a public hearing for in just a moment, now would be the time.
I didn't hear what you said.
Sorry, I was very quickly saying that if anyone would like to speak on any matter other than the 918 St. Louis. There's no rush to the podium, so we will move on to our public hearing. And so a public hearing is an agenda item that deserves a little bit more attention, and we notice the public this evening. It is for a rezoning application, a conditional rezoning application, site plan review of 918 St. Louis multifamily development. And so we will we'll start with a summary and discussion from our planning staff, move to a summary by the applicant, and then open it up for a public hearing. After we hear the public hearing, we'll bring it back to the commission for any questions, and then move to making a motion on the matter. And then if we make a motion, it will go to the city council, where there will be an opportunity to speak to the council as the public, and then the council will make a final determination on the conditional rezoning. The planning commission is the final determinant of the site plan review. I think that about sums up the process. So with that, we will start with a introduction by Kyle Bryce, our city planner.
Good evening, planning commissioners. So this is the conditional rezoning and site plan review request for 918 St. Louis. Just to orient us, this is the property in red here. So it is a little bit south of the corner with Marshall and St. Louis. This 255 is a multifamily. Then there is a more residential style house on the corner, and then another house one lot back. And then this property has a little bit more room. This does back up to the cemetery that goes beyond the frame of this screenshot here. To the south is another house. It's my understanding this is a caretaker house for the cemetery behind it. There are some single-family lots on the west side of St. Louis, but there is a multifamily here across the street. And then further down past this, for lack of a better term, caretaker house is Oppenheim Park. So there's a lot of a park space to the south. So we're here for two things. One is a conditional rezoning. So the conditional rezoning is a little bit different than a general rezoning in that it is accompanied by a legal document. It looks like a formal legal agreement, and it stipulates the conditions for the agreement. The applicant has elected to condition themselves to rezone the property to mixed use 1, but they can only use it for multiple family residential. So we saw this applicant back at the February 21st meeting as a discussion item only, and we discussed the rezoning. Here's a zoning map of the city, so you can see this light purple is MXD1. It's a little bit of a less intense of our two mixed-use zoning districts, although truth be told, they're really not that different. So you can see we have the MXD1 fronting on Marshall. We do have R1, which is single-family residential, all behind it. The cemeteries are also zoned R1, as is the park. Notably, these two multifamilies are, for reasons I'm not clear on, also zoned R1, which would make them non-conforming.
Typically, it's just a bit overlooked when we're updating our zoning map that those properties were not identified as multifamily. And we suggested at the February meeting that as we are going through our zoning update process, that those would be identified to be updated potentially to the a different zoning that clearly more fits the existing land use.
So just so everyone's up to speed, this R1, it only allows for single family. It does allow for a few other items like government buildings. There's options to have an ADU with a special land use and so on. But for the most part, you're limited to single family. This lighter yellow up here is R2, which allows duplexes, and then this gold at the top is R3, which allows multifamily. So the applicant came to us with this vacant single family house found here. They wanted to do something bigger, something with multiple units. So we had some options. In our discussion, I think we were leaning towards a mixed-use 1 zoning to connect it to this existing zoning to avoid a spot zone. So it would just go off of the existing MXD1. The conditional rezoning is to keep it non-commercial, so it would stay multifamily. And as the chair said, the Planning Commission will make a recommendation on the conditional rezoning approval or denial. It's only a recommendation. It will go on to the City Council for a future meeting. There'll be another round of public noticing, another round of public hearing, and City Council will have the final call. Here is the site plan for the property. So it is a 3-story, 12-unit apartment building. There's a mixture of units. I believe there's 3 one-bedrooms and 9 two-bedrooms throughout the site. They're stacked. I can show you the floor plan in a little bit. They're proposing an underground detention system in accordance with our city engineer and Oakland County requirements. They are meeting their setbacks. They're meeting their height limit they're under the height limit of 45 feet. They are proposed 32 feet. They're meeting their side setbacks, their rear setbacks, their primary frontage build to. They are complying with all of our parking requirements. They are meeting our ground floor fenestration requirements. They're also meeting our private open area. A lot of that is through balconies, which our ordinance permits. In terms of parking, we do have 11 spaces, so they are requesting a 4-space parking waiver. So they are required to have 15 spaces. In the mixed-use district, we use a mixture of the multiple family and the upper-level residential parking ratios. So that's all included in the packet. The general multiple family has a little bit of a higher count at 1.5 plus guest spaces, whereas upper-level residential is just 1 space per unit. So again, that's 15 required, 11 provided. That does include the EV accessible space and the ADA space, along with the 8-foot barrier-free pathway. In terms of bicycle parking, which is 1 per bedroom, they've done a mixture, which they're permitted to do, so they have some enclosed spaces, as well as some fixed spaces. They've proposed a little bike parking structure in the back. In terms of the driveway access, it's just reusing the existing drive on site, making it bigger, more compliant with our ordinance. It's pretty simple. It'll link into the existing sidewalk on the front of the building. Here are the typical floor plans for the units between the 1-bedrooms and the 2-bedrooms. I have a little rendering here on the side. In terms of the elevations, it's a lot of vertical batten board and fiber cement with some wood cladding. So we have a structure here. So I believe the hallway goes down the middle of the site, and then the units are on each of the sides. So these are permitted materials, and I know the applicant brought some materials to share with the commission. Here more elevations. Here are some renderings of the site. Zoom in a little bit closer. So the parking tucked away in the rear. It's a site from the rear. In terms of landscaping, they are complying with their requirements of putting the trees on site. So we've got 11 trees coming in, 6-foot tall vinyl screening fence around the back. They do have a dumpster that's in the northwest corner, which will also be screened. Here's some additional views and renderings. And then we do have a photometric plan included in the packet as well. We did get this today, so if we want, we can conditionally, include these in the site plan approval. So this is a, entire floor plan rather than just the units. I've also included printouts of this in the back for anyone in the public who wants them. So you can see the hallway and the stairwell in the middle. And all 3 are really the same.
Does it alter the actual footprint of the building at all? Just the interior?
I don't believe so.
I'm sorry, I missed what that was.
So this is just additional detail. It's not actually altering anything
That's
that we were
correct.
previously
Yes.
submitted. And the floor plan is not required as part of our submission,
That's
correct?
technically correct, yes. That's all I have. So again, we can do a conditional approval of the site plan if we choose to. We do have to decide to go forward with that waiver for the 4 parking spaces if that's what the commission wants to do. But the conditional rezoning will go on to City Council. So at this time, if it's all right with the chair, I'd like to bring up the applicant. We do have a video here. So if you'd like, we can play it. Is that all right with you, Chair Foster?
Oh, yeah, go ahead. Thank you. Sorry. Next time, let's add music.
Probably is. There is. Oh, is there?
If the rest is interior, we can probably, thank you. We appreciate the detail, but our jurisdiction isn't over the interior, so it does look lovely though. Thank you. And so with that, we'll have the applicant come up and provide a summary from their perspective. Thank you.
I think he's going to distribute a few of the,
Yeah, you may have.
Materials?
yeah.
Yeah.
Perfect. Come on up. Either way, and we can pass them down.
This is going to be the boarded batten
Okay.
material, and the color charts, these are going to be the exact color.
Okay.
It'll be iron ore, black, and then and this will be wood at the entryway, and then the side of the building. And then this will be the lap siding. So the boarded batten, the first one, is going to be the first 2 floors, and that lap siding will be the 3rd floor, and then kind of that roof, that pitch roof. And then I didn't bring metal roofs. It's hard to get a small piece of metal roof, but the overhangs will just be metal roofs.
So I don't see the EFS in there. That was, is EFS not on the project? Like it was shown on the elevation?
The EFS was? Yeah.
It's off?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
For us non-architects, is that an important thing?
What's EFS?
It's a, starts to look bad after a while.
Oh, okay, it was a called out material, I see, not like a structural component. I see.
Where was it?
All on the top of the building.
Oh, so he's just doing the same on the 3rd floor as he does on.
I feel like I can.
Creates that environment.
Excuse me.
Fix that.
Geez, Tom.
You can go ahead and get started. Thank you. That's okay.
Okay, well, thank you guys all for coming. Thanks for the time. Kyle, thank you. Yeah, I just want to start with just a quick project overview. We're looking to transform 918 St. Louis from a vacant home that, I'm not sure how long it's been vacant for, but we believe it's quite some time, to a community asset that will provide residents with additional housing options. It's kind of that like missing middle housing option, 4 to 12, 16 units where you don't see too often. It's not a big 100-unit complex, but it provides other housing options for residents and neighboring communities. So I'm just going to start quickly talking about some of the community benefits we hope to bring with this project. As Kyle mentioned, the stormwater management. We're going to have an underground detention system to manage that stormwater, which was obviously super important when you're right on the sidewalk there downtown. The 2 electric vehicle charging stations, we believe, we wanted to try to get a 3rd one, but I think we're going to stick with 2.
I was going to say, there's 3 in the video, correct?
Yeah,
But, okay.
yeah. There's only 2 on that site, but there should only be 2 on the site plan. But yeah, just to promote the electric vehicles and having that option. There's not a lot of communities that have EV charging stations, and then bike parking, ample bike parking to promote an active lifestyle. Hopefully, be able to bike if you don't want to walk the 15 minutes to downtown. Just bike to downtown. Another point on the community benefits is sustainable living, fully electric building. We don't plan on having any natural gas. It reduces the reliance on fossil fuels, minimizing the carbon footprint, and the energy efficiency you get per unit on a multifamily build, as opposed to a single family, is about half of the consumption. The design, we worked diligently with our architect on trying to make it, modern enough, yet trying to still have that neighborhood feel. We at least feel that we did a pretty decent job of that, and we thought it turned out pretty nice. Some of our previous success, so we had built 345 West Marshall, which was a 4-unit right down the street, and we from neighbors that live, next to the apartments to the residents that moved in. Everybody's super happy with that, and there's quite a bit of demand for a new product in this area. So, just a few more things is, I think I touched on the housing demand. There's a pressing housing demand, as we saw with the 4-unit, and as mentioned, it's kind of that missing middle where it's not like some of the apartments you see on 9 Mile. So it's more of a boutique, kind of like more of a homey feel. So that's what we're catering towards with hopeful residents in this project. And then the walkability and recreation, the walkability to downtown, and then the proximity to Oppenheimer Park. Being able to have all that open space, a block and a half or 2 blocks on the east side of St. Louis. And then just some final remarks. We believe that building this at 918 St. Louis will meet the housing needs without any negative consequences to the existing infrastructure, and putting a heavy strain on. We are going in for the variance of the 4 units, but there's quite a bit of street parking, and there is no housing on the east side, as mentioned, for about a block and a half or 2 blocks. And then lastly, we're in alignment with the community goals and values. Going all electric can contribute to the city's climate goals and align with the city's sustainability initiative, while offering neighbors a chance to rent from a higher end unit and some more housing options. So with that, thank you for your time.
Thank you. All right, with that, we will move to our public hearing, and after that, we'll open it up for questions from the commission. So I would like to open the public hearing for the conditional rezoning application of 918 St. Louis multifamily development at 652. Would anyone like to come up and speak? Please just state your name and come on up here. Yep, thank you.
Dominic Schiappaticci. I'm a resident on 1 street over on La Prairie. I can see the proposed development site from my backyard on La Prairie, and then I can see the developer's previous project on Marshall from my backyard, from the side of it. I'll just preface, when I saw the plans for the Marshall one, I was really happy. I thought that fourplex was a right fit for that street frontage there. So I like the idea of that. The construction, I will say, I was a bit, they weren't building it for me, but I was a bit let down. The materials, it looks it just doesn't look nice. No offense, but, and that maybe is an aesthetic thing, but if we're fundamentally going to change our neighborhood where I live, we need to have stricter guidelines on what materials are used on our housing. I did like that you guys did mitigation, like in the back, it's a permeable parking surface. I thought that was really nice. The pond that's back there, I'm worried about, because with increased rain, it's filled more often, and mosquitoes. And how does that, that's another question, how that works. Is it licensed, is it inspected yearly? But right now, the developer said it fits an existing need of an apartment building. We already have that need there. It's already filled with the existing apartment buildings. If you take a walk down St. Louis, or if you take a walk down La Prairie, you'll notice it's a beautiful mix of single-family homes and duplexes. That's our neighborhood. And when you walk down there, you don't even tell that the duplexes are 2 homes. They all look like 1 home. That was one thing I did kind of like about your project. It sort of looks like 1 just big house, but it's 4. Again, that's more reasonable for our neighborhood. Waiving the parking, that area has become more popular. I'm happy to say, go down Marshall, we have some really fabulous little shops now. But there's people now parking for those shops, so that takes up some of the parking already on the street. And the people that live in the apartments around there, I live next to one of those buildings, they're multi-car households. People aren't giving up their cars. They're not. So they're multi-car households. So a lot of the residents also park on our streets. So we have the shops, we have these existing apartment buildings already taking up the spaces. Our Montessori that's there on the corner twice a day, it's a traffic jam. And I'll tell you, it's hard to navigate that driving with kids running around there with all the spaces filled on the street. So there is a safety concern, I think, too, with adding another big building with more cars on the street. And the other kind of last thing about that is, we keep saying we're a green city. That does not mean every space has to have a 3-story building on it. And putting in permeable parking is great. What's better is open space around our apartments, around our houses. Our town floods. Our infrastructure is aging. Our sewers are old. I'm not sure where the retention, do those drain in the ground eventually, or does it go into our storm drain, but just slower? Because if it goes in our storm drain, but just slower, that's still added capacity to our storm drains. Add to that 12 more flushing toilets, 12 more dishwashers. When it's a net, it's not a net gain, it's a net loss there on this. But I really just hope, I guess in the end, and I hope to you guys too, I probably from a family too that's developed properties around Michigan. This is a street of single-family homes and duplexes. Make a duplex, make it really high-end. That would benefit us there. Sorry for anyone else, but that would maybe make my home value even skyrocket more. That's going to help me. And if I have one more thing to say, when it comes to code enforcement, are we capable of providing the necessary code enforcement for another large apartment building? This is large. I live right next to one. If you work for the city, you've probably had my angry calls. I spend a lot of time on the phone calling the management companies of the nearby apartment buildings because of rats, because of overflowing dumpsters, because of garbage tossed into my yard, loud music. Also, several of the buildings around me were missing bricks around their doorways for a couple years, and it took several calls to our code enforcement to get that fixed. Our apartment buildings are inspected yearly, so I don't know how something like that was missed. So I'm not comfortable that we have the capacity to keep adding large things like this, especially we're facing a budget crisis. Are we going to be able to hire more code enforcement? Probably not. So this is not a net positive. We have the need met with the existing apartment buildings. It's a neighborhood of single-family houses and duplexes.
Thank you, Don.
Thank you.
All right, anyone else on the matter of 918 St. Louis? We don't bite. Perfect.
Yeah. Okay. So I do want to say, just as an opener, thank you, because I know that you guys love Ferndale and that you're here, and not like a big moneymaker for you personally, like you're volunteering your time, and it's not. And we love this place. But I do want to say it was a little challenging to hear the opening description presented in a way that kind of felt like a sales pitch. So maybe we could work on having non-biased information. For example, when describing, it's already in a multi-unit area, with there being what used to be the Urbane property across the street on St. Louis, that's actually not the frontage. The frontage is on Marshall. It's not frontage on St. Louis. So that's biased. And then giving a little bit more attention to, along Woodward, there's a lot of multi-use commercial properties, and then neglecting to talk about the 100 families that live south of that property on St. Louis. So I'm just here to speak for those people in St. Louis where we live there. We live there. So,
I'm sorry, through the
Sorry,
chair,
yep.
could you state your name and your address for us?
Yes, I'm Rachel Engel.
I'm Brian Engel, and we live at 430 St. Louis.
Thank you.
Thank
I
you.
received your letter this afternoon.
Thank you very much for sharing that. I really appreciate you listening. So we just love our home. We're so invested in that place. We run an urban farm. We love our neighbors. We're very present on that street. I'm there full time. I know that street. Okay, I know it. So just in regards to a non-resident developer rezoning and altering St. Louis Street for financial gain, please consider our concerns, as we are human beings that live on St. Louis. It's understandable and respectable for the Planning Commission to seek actual affordable multi-unit ownership options. This is not an attack on the staff of Ferndale. St. Louis Street is not Marshall Street. It is primarily homeowners and a quiet residential street. We have owned our home there for over 15 years, until this proposed project, we've been really happy. We ask that the commission vote no on the proposed change of zoning and rental units for the following reasons. One, we don't need more housing, we need affordable housing. These are not affordable units. Like the units by the same non-resident developer on Marshall Street, these are $2,000 a month rental units, the equivalent of a $300,000 house. There is nothing noble about greed and land grabbing. Ferndale does not need unaffordable housing. The proposed parking is grossly inadequate. Marshall and St. Louis are already on overflow. The entire eastern side of St. Louis Street does not allow parking. Compared to a normal street, the whole street cut in half, no parking. And La Prairie. We already struggle so much with parking. 3, the units increase the percentage of non-owners in Ferndale. People want to own their homes and not be trapped in multi-generational loops of poverty from high-priced rent and a lack of ownership options. Rezoning changes the characteristic of a quiet residential street. St. Louis is not Marshall Street. It is not that street. Please walk down the street and come say hi to me in my garden. This is not Marshall Street. This is St. Louis. Unlike Marshall Street, St. Louis is not a cut-through commercial street. 5, the increase in traffic will decrease the quality of life. There are many children on St. Louis. We're not the neighborhood that we were 10, 15 years ago. Now we've got kids all over the place. I mean, literally, I get to see kids riding their bikes. It's refreshing. The children on the street actually play outside and ride bikes because this is a quiet residential street. Commercial outdoor trash receptacles attract rats and odor. This does not fit the quiet residential characteristic of St. Louis. 7, the plan increases impervious surfaces by 80% on a street that already floods. I don't know if you've come on down to that graveyard, but that street floods regularly already. So yes, I'm grateful for the impervious surfaces being considered, thank you, but that is light years away from green space. We need our green spaces, more of them, not less. 8, it's 2024. We are in an era of climate crisis. There's nothing mentioned of this plan of using non-toxic materials, green energy, solar, anyone? Reducing solar gain during heat waves, water sense, universal design for people of all abilities. For example, the black vinyl fence. Black retains heat. Global warming, black fence. Vinyl is an ecologically disastrous material. This is one example of choosing cheap aesthetics over ecologically modern materials. The worst part of the project is how outdated it already is. Buildings can be green all the way. We can be leaders. We ask that those in power reject the rezoning of St. Louis and protect the residents that live there from wealthy non-resident developers. If Ferndale chooses to flip the quaint houses on this quiet residential street and those like them into multi-unit properties, at least make it affordable home ownership crafted from green materials and resilient to the climate crisis. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome.
Good?
Welcome.
Great. My name is Larry Seville. I'm going to push my residency here in Ferndale has been 40 years plus. Most of you know me from the Michigan Fallen Foot Flow Parade, so you know my commitment to this community, to United Methodist Church, and I do appreciate the presentation you're bringing to the table. I have a bit of a conflict of interest because I live in the manager's house in the cemetery. So I live south of that, what you're considering at the present time. But living in the manager's house makes me the caretaker, not the owner, not the renter. So I just want to stipulate again, there's a bit of a conflict of interest. Not that I'm opposed to something being built on this lot, it's what's being built on this lot. I think it's an overreach. I would like to reiterate what's already been expressed up here about parking. My concerns primarily are safety and the parking issue. Any given day, especially after 5 o'clock, take a walk down St. Louis. Every parking lot on the east side of St. Louis, as far as you can go down on the street, is filled. A lot of the apartment dwelling owners already, or renters that are using the other apartments, they're using St. Louis for their overflow. Either they're not using St. Louis, they're using La Prairie. Yep. So there's an issue there about the parking. My big concern would be about the parking. I don't know how we're going to be able to manage that street. There's a lot of traffic that flows up and down St. Louis on any given day, not so much in the morning, but by afternoon, there's constant traffic coming down Marshall from 8 Mile Road to 8 Mile Road to Marshall. And that could be for lots of reasons. People are trying to avoid Woodward, people trying to avoid Allen or whatever. The other thing is, I did like the lady or whoever else was speaking about duplexes. Like most of the housing around the park, Oppenheim Park, they're duplexes, but they look like houses in the neighborhood. So my other concern from an employee of the cemetery is I don't know why anybody would want to overlook a cemetery, but the fact is the conditional of our use of the cemetery is that we have operating yards right there. Our service yard face will be not that far from where they would like to build. The other cemetery south of us, or north of us, is not as active. It's Nasherie, but there's a driveway there between our house, between the manager's house and this proposal that they have no control over. And they need that access point whenever they have a service in that back part of the cemetery. So the renters that would run into these duplexes or this apartment complex would have to tolerate our 6 o'clock in the morning, 7 o'clock in the morning operations that can go as late as 5 o'clock in the afternoon. And I don't know how that would work out with the city getting complaints about operations that we have to conduct in the cemetery. And I guess the last thing about the safety, anybody that goes down Marshall trying to make a right-hand turn on Ferndale when the Montessori school is in, it's pretty impossible. It's difficult because people are letting their children in and out, or the families are parked on both sides of that street, which I don't believe they can do that, but they do it to let their families out, which I understand, but it makes it a very difficult way to go down if you're trying to go to his or hers. So I'm not opposed to the idea of something being built there. It's what's being built there, how much of it's being built there. And that would be my primary concern for safety and concerns of the neighborhood. The parking issue is I don't know how they're going to pull that off, because if they have guests, where are they going to park? That's my question. Like, I don't know where you're going to park. So I appreciate the council. I can't say to vote no, but you know that I have strong feelings about Ferndale. I'm not opposed to the change. It's just what kind of change we're putting in our cities and what we're really trying to achieve here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Larry. All right, Kyle, first, in response to Don, I just wanted to say that in terms of that pond, I actually don't know anything about that. So I would just like you to get with city staff, and either Kyle or Roger here could connect with you just to afterwards, if you don't mind, on that, since it's a separate issue. And now I will close the public hearing.
Well,
Oh, sorry. Yes, we have some things to be read in. Yes, thank you.
yeah,
Kyle,
so
please go ahead.
we have a few emails that came in, so I can read those into the record. We did receive one email from Rachel and Brian. Thank you. Yeah. So this is from Nikki Kushner of 310 La Prairie. Regarding tonight's planning commission meeting that we are unable to attend, my husband, Ryan Campbell, and I, Nikki Kushner, are concerned about the request to develop a new multi-unit housing complex in St. Louis without enough parking spaces per the ordinance. My understanding is that the developer has asked to build this without the required allotment of parking spaces for tenants. I want to voice that I do not agree with this, as there is not enough parking in the area to accommodate this. This will create additional traffic and possible safety issues in this area, the neighboring streets, and the community. If you're considering a rezoning for this, it should only be allowed if there are enough parking spaces for 2 vehicles per unit, or at least the minimum required parking spaces per the ordinance. My other concern is that Ferndale is showing a precedent for rezoning for developers while asking the community for more taxes from the residents. This shows a lack of concern for the residents of Ferndale and gives the appearance that Ferndale is only concerned about money from developers by allowing them to do whatever they want. I hope the city will consider our concerns before allowing this. This next one is from Christina Klemecki of 830 Meadowdale. I'm writing to you this morning to voice my objection to the request for rezoning of 918 St. Louis. Lack of parking is a huge concern in our city, and the sheer thought that the city would consider allowing that to spill over into our neighborhoods is crazy. Street parking in neighborhoods is an inconvenience to the residents in blocked driveways, street maintenance, and traffic flow. This is from Sherry Allen. As a neighborhood resident, I'm opposed to the proposed request and plan as written for the following reasons. Poorly planned parking, 12 two-bedroom apartments with the potential for over 24 vehicles, only 11 parking spots, inadequate, which will add to more street parked cars. Parking on the north side of Marshall creates an already sketchy intersection. Walker, one must stand in the street itself on Marshall to see past the parked vehicles in order to cross from the north side to the south. Not too safe. Have almost been hit on a bike by a van pulling out of the Marshall Apartments lot. Guy was looking down the street past parked vehicles on St. Louis while still moving, not stopped and not looking right in front of his van. The proposed apartment building for profit will be next to a park where people, including children, will have to deal with the additional unsafe driving to navigate to see past more parked vehicles and more traffic. The rainwater catchment cistern under the parking lot to slowly release into the city's already overburdened combined storm sewer system would be ready for a 10-year storm event, inadequate. 100-year storm events have become the norm and have been predicted to occur every 11 years. She included a link to a CBSNews.com article. This is also a reduction in permeable soil, adding global warming. This takes owner-occupied housing, which is a path to generational wealth, out of the market and furthers poverty while enriching an individual not residing in the city. The rents of this previous Marshall building are not, quote, affordable. A 2-floor condominium multifamily would be better suited for the property, including aesthetically. The 45-foot tall apartment building will create more noise, block sunlight, block fresh airflow, create more pollution via more vehicles, generate more garbage, facilitate more rats via dumpsters and low-budget building materials right next to a city park and a cemetery in a residential neighborhood. 45-foot tall commercial buildings don't belong on our residential streets, causing them to be unsafe for the people living here. This design, as his previous project on Marshall, are not appropriate. I have one more. This is from Jenna Parks of 811 St. Louis. Jenna Parks and Emily Barr. I'm writing to express my strong...
Sorry, Kyle, can you just slow down a little bit?
Sorry. This is a lengthy one. Am I good? Yes. Yeah. I'm writing to express my strong opposition to the rezoning request for the property at 918 St. Louis Street from R1 to MXD1. After thoroughly reviewing the rezoning application submitted on April 29th of this year, I believe that the proposed rezoning is not in the best interests of our community. One, enhanced land use. The application claims that the current single-family use does not utilize the potential of the site and that mixed-use zoning would optimize land use. However, this assertion overlooks the importance of maintaining the character and integrity of our residential neighborhood. Single-family zoning ensures a low-density environment, which is crucial for the quality of life, safety, and cohesiveness of our community. Higher density developments often lead to increased traffic, noise, and strain on local infrastructure, which are not in line with the values and needs of our neighborhood. To that point, many families with small children utilize the public park just down the street from the proposed development site. Increased traffic and noise will have a lasting impact on how families utilize the recreation facilities the city's worked so hard to establish. For demand for housing, while the application highlights the success of a project at 345 West Marshall and the demand for modern apartment homes, it fails to provide specific data or evidence demonstrating an unmet demand for such housing at this particular location. Not only is 345 West Marshall also one of Mr., how do I say your last name? Pelusaj? Pelusas? Pelushai. Mr. Pelushai's properties, it is currently unoccupied and incredibly unattractive and objectively incongruous with its surroundings. The assumption that demand in one area translates directly to another is flawed. Our community's housing needs should be assessed through comprehensive studies and community input rather than inferred from unrelated projects. Community and economic benefits. The claim that replacing a dilapidated structure with a high-quality building will enhance the community overlooks the broader impacts of such development. The proposed apartment complex, due to its scale, could overshadow existing homes, leading to a loss of privacy, increased noise, and a possible decline in property values. The supposed aesthetic and economic benefits are speculative and do not outweigh the potential negative impacts on the established residential character of our neighborhood. Frankly, the community wants affordable housing, and this development does nothing to provide for that need. If the Planning Commission is intent on improving this development, it should at least require some of the units be dedicated to low-income individuals who meet certain income thresholds. Quality of construction design. Although the application promises superior aesthetics and construction quality, these assurances do not mitigate the fundamental issue of compatibility with the surrounding area. High-quality construction is commendable, but it does not justify rezoning if the resultant development disrupts the fabric of the community. The promise of superior design does not address concerns about increased density and its associated challenges. Support from existing developments. The reference to an older apartment community across the street is not a valid justification for further high-density development. The existing development is already part of the neighborhood's established dynamic, and adding another high-density project could exacerbate congestion and alter the balance of the community. The harmonious existence of one such development does not guarantee that additional projects will integrate. Similarly, on the parking waiver, the request for the waiver of 4 off-street spaces under section 24-2223G is concerning. This section requires the Planning Commission to ensure the reduction in parking will not negatively impact the surrounding area and that alternative transportation options are sufficient. However, given the existing congestion and limited parking available in our neighborhood, reducing the number of required parking spaces will exacerbate parking difficulties for current residents and visitors. The inclusion of enhanced bicycle parking doesn't feel like it meets the threshold for complying with 24-223G's requirements for reduction in parking required. And in conclusion, first and foremost, the developer has a track record of building structures that visually disrupt the character of the neighborhoods he infiltrates. Rezoning 918 St. Louis from R1 to MXD1 is not a strategic step towards fulfilling the housing needs of Ferndale. Rather, it poses significant risks to the quality of life for current residents. The proposed development could lead to overcrowding, increased traffic, and a departure from the single-family residential character that defines our neighborhood. I urge the City Planning Department to reconsider and deny this rezoning request to preserve the integrity and well-being of our community. That's all of them.
Thank you, Kyle. All right, so those are all the letters or emails received, phone calls. And I don't see anyone else approaching, so now I can actually close the public hearing at 7:19 p.m. And I already made my statement about Dawn, and I believe there weren't any other questions specifically that we just had to address. Definitely some themes in terms of the comments that were received. So I think I'd like to start with a statement just about affordability. So as executive director of a national affordable housing association that has financed $18 billion worth of affordable housing across the nation, an expert in affordable housing finance with a master's in urban planning, I just want to say that part of the reason that we don't have affordable housing now is because of our single-family development and design and the lack of the ability for developers to build more units in our neighborhoods. And so this will, and also it is actually very difficult to create affordable housing that you need a lot of state assistance. There are very limited resources to create affordable housing, and especially in these times where materials are very costly and financing is quite high, it is extremely difficult to do affordable housing. So there are multiple ways to combat that, and one of those is by creating more units. And so one of the reasons why we've been looking at updating our zoning ordinances to create more units across the city, which is difficult. And we do want to do that to continue to maintain the character of this community that we all live in and appreciate. And I'll move here for a reason. I am actually in this neighborhood as well. And so that is also why we're here, is to make sure that we can also at the same time maintain safety and maintain the quality of our neighborhoods and make sure that we can keep a friendly neighborhood environment. I know that when this came to us as a discussion item, we talked about how it faces the neighborhood, that it can integrate, and as definitely a concern of ours that we want to make friendly neighbors that are considerate, and there will be people that are also living in the neighborhood. So I just want to mention that because I heard a few things that in my expertise and experience of just disagree with some of the opinions about how this could kind of affect affordability, and knowing that the market just doesn't always allow for that. So I just want to make sure. I know it's sometimes difficult to hear, but I think we all are in the effort and goal of creating more affordable housing in Ferndale. Clearly there is a demand for the housing. Otherwise, we would not be getting this request, because it's quite difficult to develop, as I just stated, and developers are not going to put their money into development that is not going to be demanded, nor will the financiers of that development. And hopefully, and not hopefully, it will bring more tax dollars. I know that we are in a position where the city is asking us as residents to look to the Headley override and potentially increase our taxes, which is difficult for everyone as costs are increasing, but creating density and more units across the community will make it more efficient for us to be able to pay for those services that we all appreciate. So I just had to kind of lead off with that. But we can certainly open it up to any questions that the commission has, or any responses you might have to what we've heard. I want to make sure that we can get all of those questions answered. I do want to start off with just the conditional rezoning. I did notice that in the conditional rezoning, it states that specifically you would limit it to an apartment building as it's written, and I believe it's recorded with the deed. Then it would take another rezoning to change that. I want to make sure I'm seeing furrowing of brow, so maybe I'm incorrect in that, but I want to make sure that we're clear on what we're limiting it to. That means it wouldn't be condos, it would be an apartment building. See, shaking heads, does anyone want to?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, so.
Just, when you're responding, please speak in the microphone.
Yeah, so yeah, that's correct. It would be a conditional rezoning for apartments only. Obviously, we don't want to put any commercial other than apartments there. And there's per year ordinance, there's a 2-year timeline. So if it does not get built in those 2 years for whatever reason, it does get rezoned back to single family, R1.
Thank you.
Through the chair, on that topic, making sure that it's also apartments, that it can't be like an Airbnb kind of unit. It has to be a per month rental, correct?
It says states apartment building in the conditional rezoning. Roger, do you, in terms of the city ordinance, do you want to go ahead and respond to that?
Yeah, so the city has a separate STR ordinance that allows up to 5% of
units in a block to be Airbnb'd or VRBO'd or whatever it might be. So,
They're being short-term residents.
short-term rental. So, and it doesn't round up, so every 20, you get one. So although it's saying it's an apartment building, we really won't have any way to track when we compute the block to exclude these from it. I mean, it'd be too difficult. So, and any apartment can do it. So Ferndale House can have an STR as long as they're less than the 5%. I don't know if this block has any. But it's a first come, first serve. If there's some already in the block, it would block out any more.
Through the chair, I believe that the property owners could make it a requirement within their lease that they cannot, that someone can't sublet their unit as a SRO.
Yes, if you want to, if they want to agree to it
STR.
privately, I mean, we would try to watch it if one came in. But if they want to privately agree not to do a short-term rental, that's perfectly fine with us. It would just be hard for us to track
And
these
I'm not
different
sure
conditional
we
use
could
permits.
regulate that through site plan or the conditional rezoning has already been brought to us and the conditions are offered by the applicant.
It probably, I don't know, how many residential units are in the entire block? Do you think?
That's a long block.
60?
Do they count as one block?
Well, would that count as one unit? Like, let's say that, would that count as one property? If they, let's say all, I know it's probably not going to happen, let's say all 12 units flipped over to SROs, would that count as one since it's one kind of
So
property?
we'll add up all the living units in the entire block. So if it's a duplex, you get 2. If it's a single-family home, you add 1, that's 3. We'll add them all up,
Yeah, not
the total number of units, and let's pretend that's 80, making up a number. Then the whole block can have 4. So if nobody has any in the block, and they want 4 of them, they could apply, they could get their permit. But the whole unit, the whole apartment complex, all 12 could not be. We could run a quick calculation, tell you what this total block would do, but there's probably about 80 units in the entire, less than that. It's 1 for every 20, so the total block probably gets 3 or 4 STRs for that entire block.
They'd have to
But the whole
apply.
building is not a unit, so they can't do 12.
Through the chair, but I believe the ordinance for STRs is for the block, not the street. And so you're dealing with only houses that are on that side of the street, but you're also dealing with the units that are on Marshall, Woodward, Adams, Edgewood, and Fielding, because that would be the whole block around the entire cemetery.
Yeah, so if you look at, for example, like Leroy and Pearson, right? If you know those, they back up to each other. That block, Livernois to Farmdale, Leroy to Pearson, is the block. Leroy could have one on one side and one across the street, Leroy, because it's in the other block. So it's the 4 roads that lock you into that block are the block that we count the units in. So you could have one across the street from here as well. But then they only get so many in that block as well.
Understand, but I want people to understand that it's the block, not the street. So when you say, you know, if there's 25, people can't count the houses on both sides of the street. They have to count the houses on the block that this unit would exist on,
It's mostly cemetery.
which is mostly cemetery. But then you have all the units that are on Marshall. So how do you calculate that?
On that particular block, there's not a lot of units though.
So
'Cause it's
where are we
storage
at, Kyle?
So if it's by the block, it's actually a storage unit facility, an enterprise rent-a-car and cemetery. So it's actually very few units on that block
Really, this
proper.
huge thing. It's a corner.
So we would count for here, we'd add up the residential units, here, 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 and here. And however many residential units are in there, that's how many they get. This block would be a separate block, and they could have, add up those residential units. This would be a separate block. This would be a separate block.
About 50 or so.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
it's limited. I mean, if you add up all these residential units, it's, you know,
Oh, plus theirs, so 60, 70.
it's different. And what are the chances some go across from each other is usually not that common. But we take it by blocks, not by the street, correct?
Okay. Thank you. Actually, there was kind of a question about compliance. It's not really in the purview of the Planning Commission, but since you are here, and it is a issue of increasing density in terms of rezoning, want to make sure that we can maintain character, quality, safety of the units. Roger, could you speak to the building compliance, rental compliance, and word I'm not thinking of right now? What Liz does?
You have to repeat what the comment was in the questions. What's the concern?
There was concern just, so adding units to staff that could potentially already be stretched in terms of, what does Liz do? Code enforcement, thank you.
The capacity for code enforcement for
Yes.
12 apartments?
For adding them on, yes, could you please speak to that?
I would have no concern. I mean,
And maybe, just for the record, go ahead and introduce yourself as well, please.
Roger Crusoe, Community and Economic Development Director. Yeah, so we've reconfigured code enforcement. We previously had one code enforcement officer. We now have two. One handles south of 9, one handles north of 9, and they do rental inspections. So it's divvied up. We actually have more coverage. But I don't want to say it doesn't matter, but in a city with 9,000, 10,000 buildings, 12 is not going to make a difference. I would say in some ways, many, not every, apartment building has a professional management company that attends to it probably better. You take 409 on 9, for example, in Ferndale House. They have a professional management company. We have a lot less problems with them than a bunch of single family where some people are moving in and out. So I wouldn't have any concerns about code enforcement being able to address any code enforcement issue here, along with the other daily activities.
Anything else in terms of the conditional rezoning?
Parking waiver, the parking waiver next.
Well, I mean, it will be part,
I do have a little bit of concern.
sorry, did Rachel, did you?
Is it okay? My question was going to be about parking and unit count, so if that's not, we can get to that after. Matt's.
And we can move on that, especially if
Okay.
nobody else is, like, if there's, in terms of the conditional rezoning specifically. I mean, because obviously we can take it all as a whole.
Right. I guess through the chair, if you can jog my memory, when we saw this as a discussion item, there were 8 units, right, instead of 12, or were there always 12 units?
There was,
Please go to the mic, thank you.
Yeah, Cody Noel, part of the project on 345 West Marshall on this project as well. We initially came in, we had conversations regarding R3 zoning or MXD1. We kind of decided that the R3 was spot, which we wanted to avoid, and MXD kind of was more of that conforming with the rest of the block. So the kind of sketch that I had brought in was one of the sketches I had brought in was a building that went east and west, if you will, and didn't take up the full 80% width of the property, which is one of the conditions to MXD1. So I believe we were at 9 at that point, 9 or 10. But with this, actually with this width build, we were able to do 12. So.
Okay, I guess, so the follow-on question to that was, I was curious if there was and now it seems like maybe it's a space constraint, like, oh, we can fit the units in, versus a need to increase to 12 units to make it a viable project. So in the light of all of the concerns we've heard from folks in the area, would decreasing the unit count so that we don't overburden an already overburdened parking system still make for a feasible project, if there were 8 units instead of 12?
Yeah, I mean, it's a common, kind of common build that you see, so it's a symmetrical building. I mean, I don't know if we want to go, building something that's quite asymmetrical. We had originally planned for 12 spots, 1 per unit, but there is that blocked out spot for handicap, which I did have a question that, this goes through, and during lease up, if no one, if no handicap person applies for the unit and lives there, would we be able to have 12 spots or no?
I think we leave it open for visitors.
Leave it open for visitors. Okay.
Also, I guess I was envisioning, obviously, again, we try not to design from the bench, but just like reducing the height of the building by 4 units, so that also kind of leads into the, like, instead of like chopping off like 3 units from one side and like a unit from the top, like decreasing the overall height of the building to also kind of fit with the concerns of the neighborhood about, like, they're not necessarily against multifamily housing, but just the
Yeah.
size and volume.
I mean, we're obviously just trying to build a project that makes sense and comply with with the zoning requirements, or the requirements of MXD1. So, I mean, I know there's complaints about height. I mean, we're well under, I know that one of the emails, I think, said a 45-foot building. I mean, we're well under 45 feet. I mean, this is the building that we think, fits the area, and, provides the housing that's required for this area.
Anyone else on units?
Yeah, through the chair. Yeah, I have great concerns over the massing. I just think it's too large of a building for that neighborhood. My understanding was that it was a much smaller building when it was first presented to us, and it was presented to us as an R3, correct? When it was first?
Yes, and I think then under our direction, we said that the mixed unit was more consistent with the adjacent zoning, rather than the spot zoning. He used a planning term that means that there's no other R3 in the area, so it's considered spot zoning that is looked down upon and legally.
Correct, yeah. We came to you guys with kind of an idea, if you will, of a 3-story building that, like I said, went north and south. We cannot build that per the guidelines of MXD1. So this is per the guidelines of that, what we can build.
Through the chair, we're going through a rewrite of our ordinances, and one of the things that is going to be impacted is the zoning map. Where does this project fall into the proposed zoning?
For the current draft,
For the current draft for this property?
everything is either going to be R1 or R2.
Okay.
Anything that's
But
residential.
R2 limits it up to a 6-unit?
So proposed right now, R1 lets you go up to 4 units.
Yes.
And then R2 is going to be the new general multifamily. So R2 is really anything more than 4.
Okay.
So I think,
This is currently going to be, this would be, if that map were to be approved today, that would still be R1, which it is today.
if I had to guess, I don't have the map in front of me, so I can't confirm, but I would suspect it would be R1. So it would be allowed up to 4 units by right.
So I just pulled up the February meeting, and the agenda states the construction of a 3-story, 12-unit multifamily.
Okay.
That's, we had the discussion
Okay,
before.
so it was just a smaller
Yeah.
footprint and I'm misremembering. Understood.
Yeah, it was laid out a little differently. Yeah. I think some of the massing that we're talking about, keep in mind, because this is MXD1, we have the build-to requirement, so that's why they have to build 80% of the building up to within 0 to 10 or 15 feet of the property line. So that is why we do have the massing as it's proposed right now.
We could step back upper stories, per the ordinance, is that correct?
I think on the rear, you have to be set back so far, but they're already so far back that doesn't, they're fine.
Sorry, I meant that you have the 80% build to for the first floor, but I believe the upper stories can be set back.
I don't recall. I don't think so. I
I know, actually, it's been a
I
minute
don't
since I
believe
looked
so.
at it. Oh, no, okay.
don't think so.
I'm sorry, which topic are we on? We're on the conditional rezoning, or are we on?
If you,
I have a number of
we're talking
things
about
that,
massing, except if there's nothing,
well, one of the questions I have is looking at your floor plans. I don't see where any mechanics are. There's no mechanics room. Are all the meters for gas and electric just going to be slapped on the outside of the building?
Yeah, so as mentioned, there will be no gas. All the, as you could see in the rendering, the vertical pack units will be heat pumps and AC and a heat that'll be ducted through the units. And then the electrical meters will be on one side of the building, and that would be screened by some, some bushes and whatnot. But
Which side?
I'm sorry?
Which side?
Most likely the south side. That we don't really want to put it on the entrance. I mean, we could since we have some of those trees there, but most likely the south. That answer your question?
Yeah.
Thank you.
I mean, I'm not happy with it being outside.
I think that's typical on a building this side. So you mean like a utility
12 units?
room?
Yeah. We've seen smaller buildings with mechanical room. My other question is about stormwater management. Maybe I missed it, but was the intention of doing the same type of parking lot that you did on Marshall for this property?
No, it would be paved.
You can go ahead and stay up there. You're probably, unless you really want your exercise.
Yeah, right. And then, the only other thing that I have is, what are you expecting to rent these units out for, the single and two-room?
Yeah, it's hard. It's really hard to say, and I don't want to be put on record and say like, hey, Aaron, you said this much. I'm sorry.
Range?
Yeah, a range. A range will be. These aren't quite as large as the Marshall units. So a range would be anywhere from like 1,500 to just around 2,000 for the 2 bedrooms. So I know it's a wide range, but it's just so hard to say what the construction costs do. As we saw the last couple of years, lumber skyrockets 60%. We can't build for $1,400-$1,500 a unit.
I understand.
Hopefully that answers.
Yes, thank you.
Yep.
So market rent to, and you're not building like luxury units. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah. And the density will help bring the. We want to. I don't like using affordable because, as you mentioned, it does have that level of either state or federal assistance and more of like an attainable housing where. $1,500, $1,400, $1,500, $1,600 on a 1-bedroom, $1,800, $1,900 on a 2-bedroom. For some, it's not super cheap. It's not affordable, but we do feel that for a little bit higher end, not super high end finishes like marble flooring throughout, but it's pretty attainable for the area. 2 beds, 2 full baths.
Through the chair on the topic of rents and whatnot, the one positive that I would say about the massing of it is looking at the floor plan, there's no elevator, correct? And planning on the parking, are the parking assigned to units? Are they anyone goes, first come, first serve? What's the plan for the parking that is on site?
Yeah, we'll want to assign units just because I think it does get a little, it could get a little hectic and you have residents that are upset. We want to build community and we want neighbors to enjoy one another and get to know each other and grab coffee together. So we definitely don't want people arguing about what parking spot is there. So we will most likely put.
So with that being said, most likely if you have those 3rd floor units that are all walk-ups, if they don't have a parking spot, you're only going to be able to get so much for rent at the end of the day because someone's not going to pay the same amount for a ground floor unit with a designated parking spot compared to the person that has to bring their groceries 3 floors up and then park down the street. So you're only going to be able to get a certain amount of money for that unit.
Exactly. And touching on the point of like the more housing, more rental units built, will help with the cost of housing. I think Michelle touched on that earlier of like, in order to bring housing costs down, one, construction costs need to kind of level off a little bit, and then more housing built will help with that as well. And not these large 100-unit buildings because they're super expensive to build, but something like this where it's a 3-story walk-up garden style.
No offense.
Yeah.
It will help, but 11 units isn't really going to touch the market. But consistently and adding more and more units over time and at mass, and it's kind of like Roger's point of, while adding 11 units to 8,000 rental units in the city isn't a big, but as we continue to do it, having more units should, I think the state has, there's just such a lack of units in the market currently that every little bit helps, it's just not going to actually move the needle in terms of rent. No offense, but
No.
theoretically it will.
Yeah.
Yeah, through the chair. Ferndale is highly desirable. People really want to live here. In the past 5 years, I've known of several people who have, they went there upstairs, went from $750, $800 to $1,500, $1,600, doubled in 2 years, in 5 years. So you're going to get top dollar for it, I understand what you're saying about walking up three flights of stairs, but people are going to take that into consideration because they're in Ferndale.
Yeah.
And I mean, and so, I'm pretty familiar with the area, and the street is always clogged with parking. There's like when if you go there around noon, yeah, you're not going to see much, but if you go there after the work hours get done, I don't know if the street has if it was a double-loaded street, it would have the capacity, but I don't know if the street has the capacity to dump more cars into it, especially since especially since the adjacent apartment complex is also spilling out into the street side. So, I mean, and that's with one per unit. Didn't you say that the ordinance, it was 1.5 per unit typically for the lower floors?
For the 4 units.
Yeah, for the lower floors, it's 1.5 plus 1 for every 10 for a guest spot. And then for upper level residential, it's just 1 per unit. And a lot of cities are trending to that 1 per unit, just, right across the board. And of course,
Or
as you
removing
know,
parking minimums.
reviewing our parking minimums is something we're strongly reviewing during the course of our zoning ordinance rewrite.
I mean, and I know that it's easy to say, well, there's a chance that we might be removing parking minimums in the future, but it's not done. We still have current ordinance that has parking requirements. So, and it's something that when that's brought up to the commission and talking about parking requirements, that's going to be a pretty big discussion. And what does that mean for our community? What does it mean for our residents? But I mean, it's because it's 6 unit reduction, 4. 5, 6. Okay, 7, 8.
Yes, it's still under consideration, and we would need a waiver of 4 units for this to work.
Okay.
And when you say you don't know, I mean, it's hard without an actual study to say, what is the capacity, what is availability. We've certainly heard from residents tonight that there is some congestion, especially at certain times. It's hard to, take those matters. I mean, I drove past it on the way here, and there's certainly cars parked on the street, and there's certainly empty spaces. That's one time going through. So, I mean, it's without an actual study, it's hard to say what the capacity is. Are there any other, are you going to say that you have a parking study?
No.
In terms of parking, in terms of circulation, we can move on if there's, do we have any questions? Seems pretty satisfied with the information that we've received. It's been very nice having the, to the staff, the discussions, I think, work very well in terms of giving both the commission and the applicants the ability to have discussions prior to these submissions so that we have some of these questions answered already. Do we notice those when we know it is going to be a public hearing? The discussions, just as a question for you?
Be noticed for discussions?
Yes.
No.
Okay.
We do
I
not.
didn't think so, and but I just want to ask. Well, if there is no further Questions?
I don't have questions, but I have statements.
Well, we could leave them till after the motion, so you can have a statement on the motion.
Absolutely.
If you'd like to, but we would also need a motion for that to be, to happen. If no one's comfortable making a motion, we could have statements. I think we would probably, so for the conditional rezoning, we do not need the parking waiver, correct? So we could start with the conditional rezoning, we could start with the parking, it's up to the will of the commission. But I would say we should do both of those before site plan.
Sorry, so for clarification on the process, they are just applying for the conditional rezoning now, which if we move it on to council, they will approve or not, and then the actual plan review comes back to us? Or this is like the last we'll see the project and have any?
This is potentially the last that we will see the project, but the project will still go to the city council for just the conditional rezoning approval or decision.
Okay, so we could theoretically, it could be approved or we could move on the rezoning, not pass the parking, which would instigate like maybe a plan redraw of some kind, but we wouldn't see it again until it goes to council.
So if we wanted to table the site plan because of the parking, then I would recommend that we table the site plan because of the parking. Sorry, I should have stated it that way. Because then the applicant could come back, the conditional rezoning could still move forward, and then we could see the site plan at a different time, so.
Through the chair. But if the conditional rezoning doesn't pass, then there's no sense in passing the site plan, because the site plan is specific to the conditional rezoning.
However, yeah, so most likely the applicant, if we were to table the site plan, would wait to hear how the council moved before changing their plans.
Well, the council wouldn't move until the planning commission moves, because the council generally wants to hear what the planning commission has recommended. Doesn't mean that they always vote the way that planning commission recommends, but I don't think council is going to want to vote on something that the planning commission hasn't voiced.
The planning commission is voting on the conditional rezoning, which is not attached to a site plan, or is it? Let me look at the wording of the conditional rezoning.
Well, if it's R1, so you couldn't put this building in an R1 if you don't change the zoning.
Yeah.
Right,
You
but if
can't.
they change the
But you have to do
zoning,
the
they could
conditional
put a
first.
different building on it.
Oh, yeah.
theoretically. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's like we could, it doesn't seem like the citizen neighborhood concerns are so much against multiple unit housing and the rezoning so much as the actual planned development and its effect on the street.
Could you repeat that, please?
I may be wrong, but my take from the concerns from what we've heard about the project, and it's tied with the parking and like the way that the project currently is presented, is that the community is not necessarily against specifically the rezoning to MXD1, but what it would result in based on the plans as presented.
Yes.
So moving forward with the rezoning, but not with the plan approval, would still allow the applicant to move forward in the progression of the project while still being able to be responsive to community comments.
So the conditional rezoning, sorry, it's kind of long. Does not have this site plan tied to it in the conditional rezoning
The
contract.
request is to rezone this property from R1 to MXD1.
Correct.
If we don't pass the MXD1, this site plan can't go through.
Correct.
So they would have to go
If the
back to
city
the
council,
drawing.
if the city council doesn't pass the rezone.
Well, that's true, yes. It would then have to go to council, and council would determine whether or not they want to approve it.
Whether or not, if we vote on, if we vote on approval, it goes to city council, and city council has to vote before it can move forward. If we vote on disapproval, is that how it's worded? It would still go to city council would still be the final decision maker, because is a recommendation to city council, and then city council could vote yes or no, and then the applicant can move forward based on that.
So what you're saying is even if the conditional rezoning is disapproved tonight, you would still go forward
Amended
with,
for, yeah.
you would still go forward with approving or disapproving the site plan? So that it all moves forward?
No, it doesn't, no. I think if a recommendation for approval doesn't move forward tonight, I would recommend tabling the site plan to see what the city council does.
Okay, thank you.
In terms of procedure, was that all clear? Do you have any additions?
No, that's true, except for the site plan does come to you. So, if you're having concerns on the parking and you want to table it while the applicant goes back to have less of a request, you can do that. If there's a change you want to make to the site plan that would make you more comfortable, removing the bicycle piece and adding a couple spaces, you could do that if that makes you feel comfortable. Or if you're really uncomfortable with it, you could table it until they get their conditional rezoning, then come back and then make your decision on your site plan. It's a lot of stuff to take in.
So, and just looking at the draft motion in the packet, the findings do not mention the site plan, nor do the conditions. So I know sometimes we will tie a site plan. I just want to make clear that the site plan is not tied to, so they don't necessarily have to move together. So if it makes it easier, I can make a motion. I know that typically is not the character of the chair, but I'd be willing to.
Okay.
Okay, sure.
Is that like a last ditch that you have to, or?
I'm just saying I'm willing to.
I'll make the motion in the matter of 918 St. Louis, Sidwell number 2425-34-331-019, after public hearing was held as published for the state and place. The Planning Commission recommends approval of the conditional rezoning application and agreement to the City Council based on plans and the conditional rezoning agreement dated June 5th, 2024, to conditionally rezone the parcel from R1 Single Family Zoning District to MXD1 Mixed Use District with the following findings and conditions. Findings 1 through 6 listed here, and conditions 1, I'm going to read them. Developer agrees to restrict the use of property to residential use as an apartment complex only, and condition 2, if the project were not to come to fruition or the property is otherwise not developed as multifamily residential building within 2 years, the property shall revert to the R1 zoning district.
I'll support that motion.
All right, that is a motion to recommend approval by Azar with support by Hagforce. Any discussion on the motion?
So if I may, I think this is really a wonderful project. I think certain projects are designed for certain areas, certain parts of the city. I don't think this project is right for this parcel. We have public hearings for a reason, especially in these instances where we allow the opportunity for residents to come out and voice their concerns, the ones that are going to be most impacted by a new development in their neighborhood. And when we change the look and the feel of that, because a body or bodies decide that we want to support, additional development. Ultimately, it's the residents that have to live with that in the long term. And in this instance, I think the voices have been very loud about not approving this particular project, especially the size of it. I don't think that the neighbors or the community or the aesthetic on the street would be compromised by a lesser mass building, something for 4 or 6 units. But I just think for this particular property, this particular location, this is just too large of a project. So I will be voting no on the conditional rezoning. In addition, I will be voting no on the parking because, again, I think that impacts the size of, and the impact, the parking impacts the quality of life on the street. And if we can't support the right amount of parking based on the current ordinance, then I don't think we should support the project.
Thank you, Councilman Palka. I would remind you that the 4 to 6 units that you said would be more appropriate would still require a rezoning, and that the motion is for a rezoning. So I want to.
The plan
But
review is a
the
separate.
rezoning is for MXD1. I'm not supporting that rezoning, that change.
Thank you. And then I have a question for city staff. I don't know if you'll know this, so I might be stretching my luck here, but do you know how many letters went out in terms of the public hearing notice?
I can look that up.
Oh, thank you for letting us know that.
Through the chair, so I believe this has been an issue in the past. Staff doesn't actually send out these letters. We require it of the developer, and I think, no? Are we, staff is now sending out these letters?
It is actually per state law that the city does send out them, but is per distance, not necessarily the streets. But so in terms of the distance, that's why I was wondering.
Half your neighbors are dead with distance.
Yeah,
Hate to say
within
it.
300 feet of the parcel.
No.
Even the cemetery, sorry.
With the perimeter, you have all the cemetery. That's why I'm not referring to.
It's typically 500 feet.
No.
No. I'm sorry, but we can't really have the back and forth. I apologize because that was maybe
Sorry
a
for
bad,
that.
poor
Sorry
joke
for
with the
that.
cemetery.
Yes.
And I did want to say earlier, and was remiss, that it is really great to see people come and speak to the public comment because it's quite rare, actually. And as you said, this is a volunteer engagement for us. So clearly, we all really do care about the public engagement and about our community. And we love to see people come and voice their opinions and concerns and desires. And so thank you so much for taking the time to do that, each of you. I know we're all busy and it's very difficult to do. So highly appreciated and hope you can stay engaged. And would love that. We do try to do our best in terms of noticing. There are the state requirements, which is what the city does issue in terms of the proximity of the property, and which is 500?
It's 300 feet.
300 feet, thank you.
That's 300 feet.
Like across the street.
Yeah, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
And so it is great, and I wish, we've tried everything, and not just here, but I've seen everything tried everywhere, and it's so hard to get people engaged because of all the reasons stated, it's so busy, and you have your own things to do.
But it wasn't necessarily a street.
300, so a circle, so it would go
Radially.
circular, radially, thank you, engineer.
Like, 'cause my, there's a house, like, I'm behind the apartment building and house across from that. I would have gotten a letter.
Yes, you should have, so if you could talk to staff about that, that would be wonderful.
I want to say this, then there really shouldn't be, the whole neighborhood needs to be notified first.
Yes, they were. And so Kyle, can you let us know how many?
I don't have a receipt of how many were sent. I know Christine sent them out.
Okay.
But I don't have the number on hand
Okay.
at this time. I will
would
say
have to-
300 feet
I
from,
apologize for asking you that. I didn't prepare you to bring that information with you.
I will say 300 feet, you know, that's from the front property line of this address goes to about halfway through the parking lot of the two multifamily buildings.
So you may
Oh.
have been outside of the radius if you're on the prairie.
Homes and,
Through the chair, may I ask the gentleman in the green, you were in the manager's house directly next door, correct? Did you receive a letter?
Can I?
Please.
It's easier. From my perspective, I did receive a letter.
Okay.
From my perspective, I think moving forward for the city council, and I appreciate the appreciation that we're here. I think for me, where it kind of would have been more helpful, if the neighbors would have known specifically that this had been proposed, like, no disrespect, but I was trying to follow this lady's, I'm sorry, the council member's coding, right? I was totally confused. I have no idea what you just said, unless somebody unloaded what you just said to me. So, like, for people on that street, if they would have known that this was going to be developed on this site and that this was a rezoning meeting, I think this would have been filled. Because I think a lot of the people that live on St. Louis are in duplex. They have no invested interest, except that they live there for a little bit, then you move on. But the homeowners have an invested interest. I mean, I know that I'm a caretaker, so I appreciate that. So I would just say that if you would specifically say we're rezoning because a proposal's been made, I think you would have seen a much more
Thank you.
bigger
Yes,
response.
we do send out the letters, and thank you for letting us know that you did receive it. And again, thank you for coming. And we also post it in a newspaper that is regularly circulated throughout the city, so, and post it on the city door. It is quite difficult to find ways, and we've certainly tried different ways to engage the public and let them know that things are happening. But we do follow the regulations and best practices that we're able to get everyone to be aware. So, but with that, that is also why we have these commissions to also do the due diligence for the public as a commission of residents, and we hope to represent. There are others, I'll just say that we'll also actually, I'll leave it. Thank you for looking that up. Maybe as through our zoning ordinance update, I think we've had many discussions on in the past, but maybe it's a good time to bring it back up in terms of how we're noticing and when we're noticing. Any other
Yes,
discussion on the motion? Thank
through
you.
the chair. Just by looking at this and reviewing it for the past couple weeks, looking at the adjacencies that this property has to other MXD1 properties and the other multifamily directly across the street from it, I would, and again, the urge to not spot zone, I would support this mixed-use rezoning, just, again, because it's in a technically commercial area, and this, by doing this with the caveat that can only be an apartment building, stops any future commercial from spreading down the street. So that's where I'm at on
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Through the chair, I also believe that this would be appropriately zoned MXD1 with the conditional aspect of apartment only. I don't know that they have the right building massing, the right character, but I believe the underlying zoning is applicable to the area. It is sort of a bookend, maybe, knowing that the adjacent facility is a caretaking facility, and then there's the park. There's not a concern of creep. You definitely want that bookend to be nice and character-driven, but I think it does very much relate to the end of the street. I would no way want to see the same building mixed into the neighborhood, but I think this is, again, within closeness to an area that we see as more dense. I think it would be appropriate zoning.
And yes, I think personally that if we do not continue to support increase in units, our housing will continue to increase, as well as our inability to support our infrastructure in our community. I appreciated the comment. Actually, I was going to go back and look back about the per unit sustainability or energy efficiency being half. What was that overall? Anyways, I'm going to go look that up and see what type of massing creates that efficiency as compared to single-family housing. But I do know that overall, multifamily design is much more sustainable, resilient for long-term use, not only for environmental on the site, but also for our community's economical well-being. And again, that we are in a housing crisis, and we need the housing units, especially to increase affordability and the availability of housing in Ferndale.
Question on, let's say MXD1 does, let's say that we approve MXD1, and let's say, for example, that we disagree with the site plan approval. Does that mean that if it goes to council and MXD1 is selected, then they can come back in instead of 33 feet tall, come back with a 45-foot tall, which is the maximum, to maximize lot size on that district, and that.
If we were not comfortable with the way that the site plan is currently presented to us, we could table it and provide feedback, and the applicant could come back with a different site plan.
Would we?
Is the question that then they could do it by right because it's been rezoned to MXD1? So we lose
Control.
the leverage of the community feedback if it's not tied to the conditional rezoning.
Oh, good question.
Because I think we need to reframe this MXD1 conversation as well as, would we be fine with a 45-foot tall building being here? An extra 10 feet? 12 feet, actually.
Well, theoretically, the 45-foot tall building would also have a parking reduction that would need to come to us, so maybe we would have that.
You could
but-
put another floor on top of it and make an L-shaped building. You might be able to fit more parking on the side and not need to come back.
Yes,
I mean, that's.
personally, yes.
Through the chair, I do think that would be correct. I mean, they could have come forward with a 45-foot tall building tonight if they had the parking to make it work. But I think the site constraints, do limit that effectively. But to your point, I mean, where there's a will, there's a way.
Or if they built it and unfortunately something happened to the building or someone wanted to redevelop it afterwards.
Lost funding and then.
Well, if they lose funding and it doesn't get built in 2 years, then it reverts, yes.
Sure.
Through the chair, if they were indeed able to figure out how to do the parking on site, that does alleviate a chunk of the public comments. Not all of them, of course, but alleviates the chunk of the public comments, which was the concern of the parking on the street. But
There were some character as well, but yes.
Yes, character as
yes.
well, yes, of course, yeah.
Yeah, and that would be my feeling on that. If it does, I mean, I think a 33-foot building is pushing it, but so be it. But I don't think a 45-foot building would be harmonious with the neighborhood.
I get you.
And that's, so we're saying that we'll be all right with an MXD1, 45-foot tall building being in this site.
Do we know how tall the building across the street is? It looks like it's a low-profile 3-story. Is that how this was built similarly?
I don't know for sure. I would venture to guess that it's a little bit smaller. The first floor looks a little sunken.
Or tri-level,
Yeah.
yeah.
It looks to be like
And it doesn't have
25 feet
the
tall.
roof component either.
It does have a pitched roof, but, or a,
Very low slope.
Well, so
Yeah,
does
it's a
this
little
one as well, just pitched in the opposite direction.
So, she asked the number of, just for the record, she asked for the number of units in MXD. So there isn't a unit cap in MXD, so it is bound by how much parking can fit on the site.
and the massings
Yes.
as well, so the height.
Yeah, and
width,
setbacks and things like that.
There isn't? Did there used to be?
There is an R3.
Through the chair, would there be a green space component as part of MXD1 as well?
Yes, and they've complied with that.
No, but if the concern is that you're going to try to pack all the parking on the site and increase the unit size, you still have a green space requirement you also have to meet. So there's a lot of different stipulations that could still bring them back here.
Yeah, I mean, they still need to have a driveway width that is compliant. They still have all their setbacks. They still have the parking requirements. They've got the green space requirement, which, keep in mind, they can do some of that through the balconies that they have. So some of that is eaten up there. But overall, it's the massing and the parking, I would say.
Any other discussion on the motion? Kim?
So Roger's reminded me that we do need 6 votes to pass anything. So just keep that in mind. So there are 8 of you here tonight.
Oh, sorry, no more discussion? That's on me. Can we have a roll call vote, please?
Brazen,
No.
Subakatani,
Can you come back to me? Permitted?
Councilman Polika,
No.
Eifers,
Yes?
Newman,
Yes.
Azar,
Yes.
Showalter,
No.
Subakatani,
No.
and Chair Foster.
Yes. That was 5 votes. 4 yes, 4 and 4, thank you. I was not counting clearly. Thank you. And so we will, do we need a different motion then that passes to send to council, or we just send a failed approval motion to council?
So you can do another motion to recommend denial on the rezoning, or I don't know what we did the last time.
Through the chair. If it's 4 and 4, then nothing's going to happen.
Well, the motion does not pass, but we're wondering for the next steps.
Through the chair, I think the next step is the developer can choose to go directly to council.
Well, it still goes to council. Yeah, but we're talking about the procedurally, what are we sending to council? Do we just send a failed motion?
Anything.
What was the motion? Motion to
So-
approve the conditional rezoning?
Yeah, so it's 4-4, it doesn't, that's not, we need 6 to make a motion.
Correct. So the motion failed,
Yes.
and so, I think previously we got into this piece where we just took that to them and said the motion failed, and it didn't come with a recommendation. I believe we got into this predicament a year ago or something on something. Or if somebody wants to make another motion, but it might continue to be failed.
I mean, through the chair, it doesn't matter how you change the wording, because if you change the wording to say that we don't support this project, it's going to be a 4-4 again.
If everyone votes the same way.
Everyone votes the same way,
Yeah.
correct.
If we're comfortable taking that to city council,
If you're
then
comfortable, we can represent, you made a motion, it was 4-4.
as long as
There was
that's
a stalemate, and
procedurally
they
okay.
can watch the video, or Councilor Polika can give his perspective on this meeting.
Yes.
Through the chair. Well, and I will encourage council to reach out to all of you to get your opinion on why you voted yes or no, so that they have an understanding of why they should or should not support
Thank you.
going forward.
And so, do we know when we'll be putting it on the council, just for everyone to be aware of when they might be able to also go to council to state any feedback that they might have?
I don't want to set a date because
Okay.
that is subject to change, but council meetings are always on the second and fourth Mondays of every month at 7 p.m. So you can always check the agenda. You can always call me in the planning office to ask about scheduling. We do have legal notice timelines, so even when we put something in the newspaper, we have to do that 3 weeks in advance of a meeting. So the soonest we could possibly even get this on council would be July 8th. But again, it could be the other July meeting.
Okay, thank you. Roger's shaking his head.
You made your motion.
So, well, you will be able to, I mean, we'll go to council, and so you can present, so applicant, you typically present it before council?
Yeah.
Sorry. So with the other two, we have an application for a site plan. Do we even do we have to table those since they're before us? Or,
Up to you what you want to do. I mean, council could decide to approve the conditional rezoning, and then it doesn't have a site plan, then it has to come back to you. So if you'd like to table it to see the outcome of city council, we can bring it back to you. If there are changes you want to make to the site plan, like increasing parking, you could work on that now if that would make you feel comfortable to pass the site plan, but it needs the conditional rezoning too.
I'd like to make a motion to table this, have a discussion on that, but I just want to make a motion to table this until city council has voted on conditional rezoning.
okay, so the parking and the site plan?
Yes.
Do I have a second?
I'll support that.
We're all in.
So I have a motion from Showalter with second from Subakatani? That's the first.
Bag first.
can have it.
Yeah.
Not the easiest name to spell. Discussion on the motion. So, does anyone have anything further to say or have comments kind of already been stated for the applicant to understand a bit of where we're coming from? Does anyone have anything further that they want to mention as if we table it now, barring the decision of the city council, we may be seeing the site plan,
Through the chair, I think probably the advice to the applicant is, you've heard comments, you know where a lot of the commission stands on it. So if this were to get approved, conditional rezoning of the property, to come back with the same site plan, the same parking, read the room. Yep.
That was brutal.
Succinct.
I'm just being honest, yeah.
Yes. Any questions? Okay. All right. Well, moving on. Thank you to everyone.
We need
Any
to
vote on the
move.
table?
Everyone in favor of the table.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. All right, now moving on. So thank you, everyone, for the discussion on the rezoning and site plan of 918. As stated, it will be going to the city council for review and decision on the conditional rezoning only. All right, Kyle, do we have any discussion, administrative items?
No discussion items, no administrative items.
Do we have an update on the zoning ordinance that you would like to present to the commission, or?
Yeah, we do. So we've given our last round of comments and reviews to our consultant. So they're currently reviewing that, processing it at the moment. We made a lot of changes, and McKenna is, I guess, evaluating those changes and making some other adjustments.
I'm sorry, can you take the discussion outside of it? Oh.
So McKenna is processing our changes. We anticipate we're going to get a revised draft shortly. I'm assuming that we're going to be very pleased with the version that we will get. And at that point, we can do a public meeting here at Planning Commission. We're also going to be meeting with the steering committee, probably sending it out to some of our other boards and commissions that we also work with usually. So it will come back here for a study, probably, I'm hoping in the next month. And by the way, keep in mind, our next scheduled meeting, June 19th, is Juneteenth. So when we set our meeting back in January, that was not a city holiday, but now it is. So our June 19th meeting is canceled. So that's part of why we anticipate it's going to be back in July, and that'll kick off a lot more discussion. You all will have a lot of homework. So just be aware that it's a lot of reading, a lot of good stuff. And then there's a lengthy approval process and public comment process. So we are moving along.
So to that point, I would request that we receive that packet well in advance of whenever we would like to discuss it. So it sounds like that will most likely be the second meeting of July at the earliest. So if we're getting a full draft when you're bringing it to us, we'll have a full draft of what we're receiving, and then we're going to discuss that at the planning commission. That's what you're just, in terms of process. Since it is a full draft of a zoning ordinance, is like 4 weeks, like how much, what is the commission thinking in terms of?
Highlighted?
That's the entire thing, so pretty much.
Yeah, the more time we can give you, the better. I mean, it's certainly,
After a night.
as someone who's read it 3 times, cover to cover, it's a lot. So, yeah, we'll give you as much time as we possibly can.
Through the chair, there's no meeting on July 3rd?
No, we moved it to the 10th.
Okay, thank you. Just wanted to confirm.
Yeah, thank you.
That would be a low attendance.
That was my next question.
Yeah. So is 4 weeks sufficient for everyone? That's what we can shoot for, is at least getting it 4 weeks before putting out a,
Yeah, we can do that.
We'd make that the only thing that's on the agenda, because that's going to probably be a long one.
yeah.
Yep, we can plan around that.
Cool.
Thank you. Or we could do it in sections and maybe just have a specific time frame for the zoning ordinance, and then if we have any other business, because we're certainly going to have to do this over probably, well, we're going to have a presentation by McKenna.
I think so, yeah.
That would probably just be one
night.
like, nothing else on that agenda. But if we want to have further discussion, I would say we might have to kind of mix it up. Also, it just might be refreshing to like not talk about it for like 3 hours. So maybe as we proceed, maybe plan that we might have continued discussions. Because since there are so many changes, I anticipate that we are going to have some lengthy discussions on that. See nodding heads, so. However, I will say that the staff has done a wonderful job of being involved in the edits, as Kyle just mentioned. He was already read it 3 times. Their entire staff has. They've had meetings where they go through it together. And this is after we've had multiple meetings as the steering committee and had a lot of input. And you guys are aware that we've had meetings on the subject as well. So I think it will be a very vetted draft when it comes to us. City attorney will have read it, I believe.
So we have sent it to him, and I know he's looked at like parts of it. And frankly, I think he's going to be more concerned about specific parts rather than others.
Correct.
More administration, nonconformities, stuff like that.
Correct. So when it does come to us, as we all probably agree, we will have certain desires to have discussions, but wanted to mention that also has had a lot of inputs already. Not trying to negate anything that we might want to have with it, but great job to the city staff and the entire steering committee. All right, any commission items? Have we had any BZA meetings? Assuming not.
Not lately. I know we have a couple items in the hopper.
Looking forward to hearing from those. All right, well, everyone, thank you. And we will adjourn this evening's meeting at 8:32.
Just rip it.
I think this speaker is still